Now, I want to catch up here with the former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Immigration and the author of Population Shock, Abul Rizvi. You know that on the shows I host, I often get Abul on for a chat, and we always learn a lot. He wrote in the Independent Australia just a week back, after years of driving down places available in the skilled independent category, he'll tell us about that in a moment, the Albanese government is set to drive up numbers in 2022-23, and he says that's likely to start this month. Now, we've heard business, haven't we, for ages say we need more people, more skilled people in particular, jobs that Australians won't do. Does that make us job snobs? Maybe it does. Or maybe we're not qualified for them. I don't know what falls into this category, which is why the great man is on the line. Abul Rizvi, lovely to talk. I hope you're well.
I'm very well, thanks, Luke.
The skilled independent category is what category?
So this category, and if you bear with me, I'll just give you a little history of it. So
Yep.
This is the category that most distinguishes migrant settler nations like Australia and Canada, in that it is completely discretionary. Australia can choose to have as much of this category or as little of this category as it wants. It's not sponsored by state governments or employers or family or anybody. This category was started by the Fraser government in the 70s, and it has existed ever since. And it goes up and down depending on the level of demand in the rest of the migration program and the overall level of the migration program. So if the migration program is held at a high level, then this category tends to get push up. If the government wants to cut the migration program, this is the first category it cuts.
Right.
So from about 2013-14, when the size of this category last peaked at about 45,000 visas, it has been steadily falling. So in 2021-22, the planning level for this category fell to 6,500, which is the lowest level for this category for probably over 30 years.
Goodness. Now, is this a category where they or someone nominates specific occupations or specific skills, or is
That's
it
right.
just a coverall? Which one is it?
So it's a points-tested category, so you have to meet a pass mark.
Right.
And you are points tested on the basis of the skills you have, the skilled work experience that you have, the level of English that you have, and how young you are. So they're the main criteria on which it's... So basically, Luke, you and I wouldn't pass this category. I'm assuming your age here, I think, Luke, but
Yes,
I think you and I would miss out.
I think we might be of a very similar vintage. So if you miss out, my friend, I would miss out. Out of interest, how important is the English test?
The English test is crucial. If you can't get a minimum level of English in this points test, you can't get in at all.
Right.
So you're completely, and that criteria was introduced by the Howard government. In fact,
Yep.
I was the bunny told to do it.
So the reduction from 45,000 back to 6,500, that's entirely the work of the government, who says, right, we want to do something about this, so we're going to cut this program.
That's right. So initially it was cut when Mr. Dutton cut the size of the migration program in 2017-18.
Yep.
And then it was cut again when the former government wanted to clear the backlog of spouse visas that it had. So it had developed a really big backlog of spouse visas. It was under pressure to clear them. There was a threat of an audit by the ANAO on the way it was processing spouse visas. So the government moved to clear that backlog. And in order to create the spaces to clear that backlog, it cut these visas. So essentially, spouses of Aussie citizens got priority, as they should, over independent skilled migrants.
Okay. That examination or that audit, that would have been, you would imagine, quite embarrassing for the government.
Well, the audit's not completed yet, and it will report probably later this year, and I think it will be embarrassing for the government.
Right. So but the threat of it, obviously, would you say the threat of it made the government act?
Yes, I think the threat of it made the government look into legal advice on whether it could limit the number of spouse visas. Right. And it would have discovered what I told the Howard government in 1996, that the law prevents you from limiting the number of spouse visas. You must manage them on a demand-driven basis.
Yeah.
The Howard government said to me, well, change the law then. And we set about trying to change the law, but the Senate rejected to change, and so the law stayed as it was.
Right. There's an issue here, and you and I have talked about it before, but it might be appropriate just to mention it now under the spotlight of slow processing. We're hopeless at it, aren't we? I mean, the numbers you and I have talked about before about people who aren't processed through the system, they're enormous, aren't they?
Yes, the backlogs are just frightening, frankly. And I have to say to you, there is a perception amongst some people that if you process slowly and create big backlogs, you're actually strong on borders. It's actually the reverse. Because huge backlogs and slow processing times reward the unscrupulous and penalise the honest.
So the way around that is you deal with people quickly, you assess them so that you either accept them or not, make a decision, and I suppose deport them if I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. But we've got appeal after appeal after appeal opportunity, don't we?
That's true. That's true. Deporting is a difficult job. So,
right.
which makes the initial visa decision crucially important. Get that right, and everything else tends to work okay. If you get the initial visa decision wrong, that's when you get yourself into trouble.
Right. And we've cut staff, haven't we? In Canberra, in the department, or wherever it might be in Australia, we have reduced staffing levels, and that's been. Would you say that's essentially the reason why there is a backlog there is?
That's probably one of the biggest reasons that we have a huge backlog. We've cut processing staff, and in fact, the Department of Home Affairs is facing a cut of $875 million per annum over the next couple of years.
Goodness.
And that's going to make things really, really difficult.
Well,
and I can understand the business community is up in arms about this.
Yeah. Will the new government look at that and perhaps change it?
Well, I hope so. But as you know, the budget's in a dire state. And every department will, and every minister will say, well, I need money. And this is going to be really, really hard. You know, giving money to processing visa applications, even though we make a profit out of the processing of visa applications because we charge the applicants a huge amount, but that money just goes into consolidated revenue. That doesn't necessarily go to the department.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
For a spouse visa, for example, we'll charge close to $8,000, but the cost of processing it is about $1,000.
Oh, wow.
So we make a good profit out of it.
Yes.
But the money goes, the revenue goes into CRF. The revenue doesn't go into the department.
Yeah. Tell me about the occupations that are typically now fall under this category.
So last year, almost 90% of the occupations that got through were health-related. So they were either some sort of registered nurse, a general practitioner, a specialist, etc., or a paramedic, things like that.
Yeah.
Almost entirely. So there were some childcare teachers, early childhood teachers.
Yes.
But beyond that, there wasn't a lot selected. So to increase this visa from 6,500 to next year over 16,000, they're going to have to broaden the range of occupations that are selected, and they're probably going to have to lower the pass mark. Now, that's fine, because at the moment, the pass mark is really, really high. You know,
how high?
As I said. Well, you have to almost score 100% for some people.
Goodness.
So a nurse can get through at 85%.
Yeah.
A doctor can get through at about 90%.
Yeah.
An ophthalmologist has to score 100%.
Goodness me.
Which is virtually perfect, you know. Hardly anyone can score 100%. 100% is, you know, really, really difficult.
And you get one crack at this, or can you come back in a month and have another go?
No, you can. What you do is lodge what's called an expression of interest into the system.
Yep.
And the system will score your what your self-assessed score is, including whether you met the skills requirement of the relevant Australian skills assessing body, the score you got in your English test, so they'll know all that, and so they'll make a preliminary assessment of your point score, and then if they think you're suitable, they'll send you an invitation to apply. You then lodge your application, pay your money, and then they'll go through all of that all over again to just check that you were telling the truth.
So when, for example, the new government wants to ramp up nursing or nurses in the aged care sector, in fact, ramp up that sector.
Yes.
Where will likely those people come from, and how difficult will it be for us to get, big numbers from overseas?
Well, there'll be two issues here. Firstly, registered nurses are in demand everywhere. Everyone wants registered nurses. America wants registered nurses. New Zealand wants registered nurses. Canada wants them. The UK wants them. Europe wants them. Everyone wants registered nurses. So getting more registered nurses will be difficult.
Right.
Secondly, aged care workers are not considered sufficiently skilled to make it through the point system, and generally find it also difficult to get through employer sponsorship because the level of skill is not considered high enough. So the government is going to have to work out how to get those people through the system without the risk, and this is the big risk when you bring in people with low skills and often with poor English, that they are at risk of exploitation. So they're the two challenges they'll face. Registered nurses, hard to get. Aged care workers, easier to get, but hard to manage.
You say with the ageing of Australia's workforce in the traditional trades like carpenters, plumbers, joiners, etc., the current shortage of skilled tradespeople will likely grow over the next 10 years. An increase in apprenticeships for local students unlikely to address that shortage. I imagine there's demand, like there are for nurses, for people with a trade all over the world similarly. Is that right?
People who are sufficiently skilled carpenters, plumbers, etc., there's a huge demand for. I'm sure if you've tried to get a carpenter or a plumber lately, you'll have found it really hard. The first thing they'll tell you is, mate, I'm really busy. I can't do anything for you for months and months.
Yes. So are they out there? How do we entice them to Australia? It seems to me it comes back to maybe the money we can offer them or something like that.
Yes, the salary, although salaries for carpenters and plumbers in Australia is great. I don't think they're underpaid. They do very well. If you're a good carpenter or a good plumber, you'll be just fine. The really tricky part is how do you get carpenters and plumbers, etc., who meet Australia's standards and are going to be licensed to be licensed plumbers and carpenters. And they're the people who are hard to get. They're hard to train domestically and they're hard to get from overseas. In my view, the best way to get them would be to bring them in as students and help them through the skilling process through TAFE, etc. And then make them permanent residents if they can pass all those tests. That would be probably the best way to do it. But our system doesn't work well in respect of overseas students doing traditional trades. It just doesn't let them through the system. The system has too many blockages on it. So, for example, it'll let a cook through really easily.
Goodness.
It'll let a hairdresser through really easily, but it won't let a carpenter through easily. And that's got to be fixed.
Yeah. That's madness.
I tried to fix it in 2015, but I got a blood nose from the Senate.
That wouldn't have stopped you. Or maybe it would have. Listen, the skill shortage that I hear from business leaders around the place, particularly in hospitality, can that be sorted with overseas workers? And is it easy if you're an overseas, for example, you mentioned chef there, but someone who would work in a restaurant on the floor or perhaps in a bar, are they able to get access to Australia easily or not?
Low-skilled workers are a really difficult issue for Australia and Australia's visa system, because the big risk with low-skilled workers is that they get exploited and underpaid, especially if they haven't got good English. We're starting to get... We've traditionally used students and working holiday makers to fill those jobs.
Yeah.
The students are starting to come back, and the working holiday makers are slowly starting to come back, but not nearly fast enough to keep hospitality businesses happy.
Yeah. We're going through a tough period, aren't we? I mean, budget size of debt aside, nearly, if not full employment, but still great demand for people to fill jobs. And it's a real challenge for government, isn't it?
Yeah. I've never seen it like this before. I've seen booms before. I've experienced those. So in 88, 89, we had a boom, and I remember the issues, but they weren't like this. We had another boom in 2005, 6, and 7. And, I remember getting belted from pillar to post by various ministers about why can't you speed up processing more? And we were processing like we were just belting out the visas at that stage, but we were still under pressure. But that was tiny compared to what's there now. This level of skill shortage I've never seen before. This is off the charts.
Right. All right. Always good to chat. We learn so much from those conversations. I appreciate your time very much indeed.
No worries, Luke. Good on you, mate.
Good on you. Abul Rizvi, former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Immigration and author of the excellent book, go looking for it, Population Shock.